The year was 1887, and London wore its contradictions like a second skin. By day, the city gleamed with the pride of empire. Carriages clattered over cobblestones slick with rain, their wheels splashing mud onto the hems of lace gowns. The air was thick with coal smoke, but the gentlemen in top hats and polished boots pretended not to notice. They spoke of progress, of railways and colonies, of morality and duty. Yet, as the sun dipped behind the soot-stained rooftops, the city exhaled. The fog rolled in from the Thames, curling like a living thing through alleys and across bridges. Gas lamps hissed to life, their glow softening the edges of Mayfair's grandeur and casting Whitechapel into a chiaroscuro of menace and desire. London's second rhythm began, a heartbeat of whispers, footsteps, and laughter muffled behind velvet curtains. It was in this twilight world that Eleanor Blackwell thrived. To the casual observer, she was a widow of respectable means, her mourning attire still lending her an air of tragic dignity. She moved through drawing rooms with quiet grace, her gloved hands folded, her voice measured. But those who looked closer, and few dared, saw the steel beneath the silk. Her townhouse in Bloomsbury was a study in duality. The front parlor, with its lace curtains and polished piano, welcomed society ladies for tea. They gossiped freely, never suspecting that Eleanor's polite nods and sympathetic smiles were a mask. Every whispered complaint about a husband's late nights, every careless mention of a politician's indiscretions was stored away like coin in a vault. Behind the parlor, however, the house transformed. Heavy drapes muffled sound, and the air was perfumed with sandalwood and rose. Here, Eleanor orchestrated her true empire, a network of courtesans whose beauty and wit could topple reputations. She was not merely their employer, but their strategist, teaching them how to listen, how to coax, how to turn pillow talk into leverage. One evening, as the fog pressed against the windows, Eleanor stood at her writing desk, reviewing a list of names. Judges, bishops, lords, all men who had passed through her doors. Each name was a thread in the web she wove, and she knew that with a single tug she could bring down a career, a marriage, even a dynasty. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Clara, one of her most trusted girls, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Another carriage waits outside, madam. A gentleman of Parliament. He insists on discretion." Eleanor allowed herself a faint smile. They always do. As she adjusted the black lace at her collar, she caught her reflection in the mirror. For a moment, she saw not the composed widow, but the woman beneath, the one who had clawed her way from ruin to power, who understood that London's true currency was not gold, but secrets. Outside, the city pulsed with contradictions. The empire's heart beat proudly in daylight, but at night it rotted quietly, one whispered confession at a time. And Eleanor, standing at the threshold of both worlds, knew that the storm gathering in the fog would soon test the strength of every mask in London. The fog had barely lifted from the streets when Eleanor Blackwell stepped into her carriage, her black veil drawn low. To the world, she was still the grieving widow, a woman who had lost her husband to illness 2 winters past. But grief had long since hardened into resolve. In a city where women were expected to fade into quiet obscurity, Eleanor had chosen a different path. Her late husband had left her little more than debts and a tarnished name. The creditors circled like vultures, and society whispered that she would soon be forced to sell her townhouse. But Eleanor had discovered something in those desperate months. Men who pitied her in daylight were willing to pay fortunes for her company in the dark. Not her body, she had no need to sell that, but her presence, her listening ear, her ability to make them feel powerful, desired, and unjudged. It began with quiet suppers in her drawing room, a lonely barrister, a disillusioned merchant, a lord with a taste for scandal. They came seeking comfort and left lighter of both heart and purse. Eleanor learned quickly. Men revealed more in whispers than they ever would in Parliament. She began to weave those whispers into a tapestry of influence. Soon she realized she could not do it alone. She sought out women like herself, clever, ambitious, and overlooked by society. Clara, a seamstress with a sharp wit. Marianne, a fallen debutante with eyes like daggers. And Rose, whose laughter could disarm even the sternest bishop. Eleanor trained them not merely as courtesans, but as confidants, spies, and actresses in the grand theater of London's hypocrisy. Her townhouse transformed. The front rooms remained respectable, but behind a hidden door lay a salon of velvet drapes, low candlelight, and music that softened inhibitions. Here, Eleanor's girls entertained the city's most powerful men. They listened, they flattered, they teased, and they remembered everything. One evening, as Eleanor moved through the salon, she paused to watch Marianne lean close to a judge, her hand brushing his sleeve as he whispered about a rival's weakness. Across the room, Clara laughed at a bishop's joke, her eyes sharp as she tucked away every detail of his indiscretions. Eleanor felt a surge of pride. This was no mere brothel. It was an empire of secrets. Later, in the quiet of her study, Eleanor opened a leather-bound ledger. Inside, she recorded not debts or payments, but truths. Who owed money? Who feared scandal? Who longed for power? Each entry was a weapon, and Eleanor sharpened them with care. She closed the book and extinguished the lamp. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt not despair, but control. London's men believed they ruled the city. Soon, they would learn that its true power lay in the hands of a widow who had mastered the art of listening. And outside, the fog thickened once more, as if the city itself conspired to keep her secrets safe. The night was colder than most, the fog so thick it seemed to press against the windows like a living thing. Eleanor Blackwell sat in her study, ledger open, when the knock came, sharp, urgent, and far too late for polite callers. Clara entered, her face pale. "Madam, it's Judge Harrington. He's dead." For a moment, Eleanor thought she had misheard. Judge Edward Harrington, one of her most powerful clients, a man who had whispered promises of protection and influence in her ear. Gone? She rose slowly, her gloved hand tightening on the edge of the desk. "Where?" she asked. "In Whitechapel. They found him in an alley near the old chapel ruins. The police are already there." Eleanor dismissed Clara with a nod, but her mind raced. Harrington was no ordinary client. He was a pillar of her network, a man who had shielded her from raids and inquiries. His death was not just a tragedy, it was a threat. By dawn, the newspapers screamed the scandal. "High Court judge found dead in East End." The details were lurid. His body discovered slumped against a crumbling wall, his throat cut with surgical precision. But it was the final detail that chilled Eleanor's blood. A note pinned to his chest, written in a cipher of strange symbols and Latin phrases. The police dismissed it as the work of radicals, but Eleanor knew better. She had seen those symbols before, years ago, in another life. That evening, Eleanor gathered her courtesans in the salon. The air was heavy with sandalwood, but the usual laughter was absent. Clara, Marianne, and Rose sat in silence, their faces drawn. "Listen to me," Eleanor said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded. "Judge Harrington's death will bring questions, yes, but questions can be answered. What matters is that we remain united. No rumors, no fear. Do you understand?" They nodded, though unease lingered in their eyes. Later, alone in her study, Eleanor unfolded a copy of the note. A constable, too eager to impress, had shown it to her earlier that day. The symbols danced before her eyes, a language she had once sworn never to see again. Her hand trembled as she traced the ink. She remembered candlelit chambers, whispered oaths, and the face of a man who had tried to escape it all. Harrington. He had once been more than a client. He had been her ally, her lover. And now he was dead. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the city whole. Somewhere in the distance, church bells tolled midnight. Eleanor closed her ledger, extinguished the lamp, and whispered to the empty room, "They've returned."
The presses of Fleet Street thundered through the night, spitting ink and scandal into the veins of London. Among the clatter of type and the smell of hot metal stood Thomas Gray, a journalist with ink-stained fingers and a reputation for chasing stories others dared not touch. He was not the most celebrated writer in the city, nor the most polished, but he had something rarer, persistence. Where others bowed to editors, patrons, or politicians, Thomas thrived on the stories whispered in taverns and back alleys. He believed that truth was not found in Parliament speeches, but in the shadows, where men thought no one was listening. The morning after Judge Harrington's death, Thomas sat hunched over a desk, the newspaper headline glaring up at him. "High Court Judge Found Dead in East End." The details were sparse, but the coded note pinned to the corpse set his instincts alight. "Not a robbery," he muttered, tapping the page with his pen. "Not a crime of passion, a message." His editor, a stout man with little patience for conspiracy, waved him off. "Gray, leave it. The police will handle it. Write about the Queen's Jubilee preparations. That's what sells." But Thomas ignored him. He had seen too many scandals buried under polite silence. A judge murdered in Whitechapel with symbols no one could explain. That was no coincidence. That evening, Thomas walked the fog-choked streets of Whitechapel, notebook in hand. He spoke with a constable who had been at the scene, bribing him with a flask of gin. The man described the body, the symbols, the strange hush that had fallen over the officers when they saw the note. "Like they knew it meant something," the constable whispered, glancing around nervously. "But none of us dared say it." Thomas scribbled furiously, his mind racing. A secret language, a judge dead in the East End, and whispers, faint but insistent, of a society that met in hidden chambers where power and piety twisted into something unholy. His investigation soon led him to Eleanor Blackwell's name. At first, it was only a rumor, a widow with influence in places no woman should have influence. But the more he asked, the more her name surfaced in taverns, in police reports, in the guarded whispers of men who should have known better. One night, Thomas stationed himself across from Eleanor's townhouse in Bloomsbury. He watched as carriages arrived under cover of darkness, their passengers cloaked and hurried. He saw the flicker of candlelight behind heavy curtains, the silhouettes of figures moving in rooms not meant for polite society. He jotted a note in his book. Blackwell, not just a widow, something more. Back in his cramped lodgings, Thomas pinned scraps of paper to the wall. The judge's death, the coded note, Eleanor's name, the whispers of a society. The threads began to connect, though the picture was still incomplete. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the web of clues. Somewhere in the fog of London, a truth was waiting to be uncovered, a truth that could topple the city's most powerful men. And Thomas Gray, with nothing but ink, stubbornness, and a dangerous curiosity, intended to find it.
The city had not yet recovered from the shock of Judge Harrington's death when the whispers began. They spread like smoke through taverns, gentlemen's clubs, and drawing rooms. Strange symbols, a secret language, a judge found in Whitechapel with a message no one could read. Thomas Gray followed the trail with growing unease. In the archives of the British Museum, he pored over dusty manuscripts, tracing the symbols from the judge's note. They were not random. They belonged to a forgotten liturgy, fragments of Latin prayers twisted into something darker. The words spoke of purity through sacrifice, of cleansing the soul through acts unspeakable. One evening, Thomas met with a contact in a dimly lit tavern near the docks. The man, a former servant to a bishop, leaned close, his voice trembling. "They meet in the old crypts," he whispered. "Not just priests, lords, scholars, even men close to the crown. They wear masks, chant in Latin,
and they do things no Christian man should." Thomas pressed him for details, but the man fled into the fog, leaving only fear behind. Meanwhile, Eleanor Blackwell sat in her study, the coded note spread before her. She knew the symbols too well. They belonged to the society she had once sworn never to speak of, a brotherhood that cloaked its depravity in the language of faith. She remembered the flicker of candles in underground chapels, the chanting of men in robes, the way they spoke of sin as though it were salvation. Her courtesans noticed her distraction. Clara asked quietly, "Madame, do you know what the note means?" Eleanor's eyes hardened. "It means the past is not finished with us." That night, Thomas ventured into Whitechapel again. Guided by rumor, he found himself before the ruins of an abandoned church. The doors were chained, but through the cracks he saw faint candlelight flickering below. He pressed his ear to the stone and heard it. Low voices chanting in Latin, rising and falling like waves. The words chilled him. They were not prayers of mercy, but invocations, promises of purity through blood. Suddenly, the chanting stopped. Silence pressed against the walls. Thomas stumbled back into the fog, heart pounding, certain that unseen eyes were watching him. Back in Bloomsbury, Eleanor extinguished her lamp and whispered to the empty room, "They will not stop, not until they have consumed everything." The fog outside thickened, curling against the glass like a warning. London itself seemed to shudder, as if the city knew that something ancient and corrupt was stirring beneath its streets. The fog that once cloaked Eleanor Blackwell's secrets now seemed to betray her. It lingered too long outside her townhouse windows, muffling footsteps, swallowing whispers. She had built her empire on silence and discretion, but silence had turned against her. It was no longer a shield, it was a warning. In the salon, her courtesans moved with unease. Clara, usually quick with laughter, now glanced nervously at the door whenever a carriage stopped outside. Marianne, bold and sharp-tongued, whispered that the police had begun questioning girls in Whitechapel. Rose confessed that one of her clients, a bishop, had abruptly cut ties, muttering about dangerous company. Eleanor listened, her face calm, but inside her chest a storm raged. She knew the signs. The cult was stirring, and with it came scrutiny. Judge Harrington's death had not only unsettled her allies, it had emboldened her enemies. Meanwhile, Thomas Gray's investigation pressed closer. He had begun to ask questions in places Eleanor thought untouchable. Gentlemen's clubs, private libraries, even the servants' quarters of Parliament. His name was whispered now in the same breath as hers. One evening, as Eleanor left a discreet supper in Mayfair, she saw him across the street. His coat collar was turned up against the fog, his notebook tucked under his arm. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, hers sharp with warning, his alight with curiosity. Neither spoke, but the air between them crackled with unspoken recognition. Back in her study, Eleanor opened her ledger. The names that once gave her confidence now looked like threats. Each man listed was a potential betrayer, each secret a weapon that could be turned against her. She dipped her pen in ink, hesitated, then drew a line through Harrington's name. The act felt like a funeral. Clara entered quietly. "Madame," she whispered, "there are rumors. They say the judge's death was no accident. They say it was a message." Eleanor closed the ledger with a snap. "Rumors are the currency of fools. We deal in truth, and the truth is this: if we falter, we are finished." But even as she spoke, she felt the weight of the lie. That night, Thomas Bray pinned another scrap of paper to his wall of clues. Blackwell, connection deeper than business? He stared at the web of notes, the lines converging on her name. He didn't yet know the full truth, but he could feel it. Eleanor Blackwell was not merely a witness to London's corruption. She was at its very heart. The fog thickened once more, pressing against the city like a hand tightening around its throat. Eleanor sensed it. Thomas sensed it. And somewhere beneath the cobblestones, the cult watched, waiting for the moment to strike.
The fog pressed heavy against Eleanor's townhouse that night, as though the city itself sought to suffocate her secrets. She sat alone in her study, the coded note spread before her, its symbols burning into her mind. For days she had tried to bury the memories, to convince herself that she had severed all ties to that world. But the past was not so easily silenced. Her hand trembled as she reached for a decanter of brandy. The glass clinked against the rim, betraying her composure. She closed her eyes, and the present dissolved into memory. Flashback, the initiation. She was younger then, barely more than a girl, her mourning clothes exchanged for a white gown. The chamber was lit by hundreds of candles, their flames flickering against stone walls carved with Latin inscriptions. Men in robes stood in a circle, their faces hidden behind masks of gold and ivory. A bishop's voice intoned, "Puritas per sacrificium," purity through sacrifice. Eleanor knelt, her heart pounding. She had been told this was a society of enlightenment, of power and protection. But as the chanting rose, she realized it was something else, something darker. The air was thick with incense, with whispers of sin disguised as salvation. And then she saw him, Edward Harrington, not yet a judge, but already a man of conviction. His eyes met hers across the circle, filled not with zeal, but with doubt. In that moment, she knew he was as trapped as she was. Flashback. The forbidden love. Weeks later, in the quiet of a library, Harrington had spoken the words she had longed to hear. "This is not faith, Eleanor. It is corruption. We must leave it behind." They met in secret, their bond forged not in passion alone, but in shared defiance. He dreamed of exposing the society, of tearing away its mask of piety. She dreamed of freedom, of a life unshackled from the rituals that haunted her nights. But dreams are fragile things. When whispers of Harrington's betrayal reached the society, Eleanor was forced to watch as the circle turned on him. His death, years later, was no random act of violence. It was punishment, a warning. Return to the present. Eleanor gasped, the memory shattering as the glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. She pressed her palms to her face, her breath ragged. Clara rushed in at the sound. "Madam, are you unwell?" "I am fine," she said coldly, though her voice betrayed the tremor beneath. But when Clara left, Eleanor whispered to the empty room, "They killed him because of me, and now they will come for me too." Outside, the fog thickened, curling like smoke from a funeral pyre. The past had returned, and with it came the promise of ruin.
The salon no longer felt like a sanctuary. Once, Eleanor's courtesans had moved through its velvet-draped rooms with laughter and confidence, their voices mingling with the music of a hidden piano. Now the air was heavy with suspicion. Every glance lingered too long. Every whisper seemed edged with treachery. Eleanor sensed it first in Clara. The girl who had once been her most loyal confidant now avoided her gaze, her hands fidgeting when asked simple questions. Then came Marianne, bold and sharp-tongued, who returned from a supper with a lord carrying more than coin. She carried fear. "They're asking about you, madame," Marianne whispered one night, her voice trembling. "Not just the police, men in masks. They want to know what you know." Eleanor's blood ran cold. The cult had infiltrated her own house. Meanwhile, Thomas Gray's investigation reached a dangerous crescendo. In the archives of a private library, he uncovered a ledger hidden within the estate papers of a deceased nobleman. The entries were coded, but Thomas recognized the same symbols from Harrington's death. And beside them, names. Names that should never have been written in such a book. Among them, bishops, lords, and one that made his hand tremble as he copied it into his notebook. An advisor to Buckingham Palace. The implications were staggering. This was no fringe society of radicals. This was wrought at the very heart of the empire. Back in Bloomsbury, Eleanor confronted her courtesans. "Someone has betrayed us," she said, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "I will not ask who. I will only say this. If you think the cult will protect you, you are mistaken. They do not protect, they consume." The women shifted uneasily, their faces pale in the candlelight. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears, but she said nothing. Eleanor knew then that the betrayal had already rooted. That night, Thomas followed a lead to a smoke-filled gentlemen's club in St. James's. He bribed a servant to slip him into the back corridors, where he overheard two lords speaking in hushed tones. "The Blackwell woman knows too much," one muttered. "Then she must be silenced. The palace can't afford scandal." Thomas's heart pounded. He scribbled the words in his notebook, but the ink blurred as his hand shook. This was no longer just a story. It was a war, and Eleanor Blackwell was at its center. Eleanor, alone in her study, opened her ledger once more. She stared at the names, at the power she had once wielded like a weapon. But now the ink seemed to bleed across the page, as though the secrets themselves were turning against her. She whispered into the silence, "London is burning, and it begins with me."
The rain had not stopped for 3 days. London's streets ran slick with water. the gas lamps casting halos in the mist. In Bloomsbury, Eleanor Blackwell's townhouse stood like a fortress, its curtains drawn tight against the world. But inside, the walls could no longer contain the weight of her secrets. Thomas Gray arrived unannounced, his coat dripping, his notebook clutched like a weapon. Clara tried to bar his way, but Eleanor's voice cut through the silence. "Let him in." The journalist stepped into the parlor, his eyes sharp, his jaw set. For weeks he had circled her world, gathering scraps of truth, weaving them into a tapestry of suspicion. Now he had come for answers. "You knew Judge Harrington," Thomas said without preamble. "Not just as a client, you knew him." Eleanor's hands tightened around the arm of her chair. For a moment she considered denying it, but the storm outside seemed to demand honesty. She rose slowly, her black gown whispering against the carpet. "Yes," she said, "I knew him. I loved him." Thomas's pen hovered over his notebook, but he did not write. He watched her instead, sensing that what came next would matter more than ink. Eleanor crossed to the window, staring into the rain-blurred night. Her voice was low, almost a confession. "We were both part of it once. The society, the rituals, the lies dressed as faith. I was young, desperate, and they promised me protection. Harrington, he was different. He saw it for what it was. He wanted to expose them." She turned, her eyes glistening. "They killed him because of it, and I let them. I was too afraid to stand with him. That is my sin, Mr. Gray. Not the salons, not the secrets. My sin is cowardice." Thomas felt the weight of her words settle over him like the fog outside. He had expected denial, manipulation, perhaps even seduction, but not this, not the raw truth of a woman haunted by her past. "Why tell me now?" he asked quietly. "Because they will come for me next, and when they do, the city will believe their lies. You are the only one who can tell the truth. But know this, if you write it, you will not survive unscathed. They will destroy you as they destroyed him." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain against the glass. Then Thomas closed his notebook, his decision unspoken but clear. He would not walk away. Eleanor studied him, a flicker of something, respect, perhaps even hope, passing across her face. For the first time in years, she was no longer alone in her burden. But outside, in the fog-choked streets, unseen figures watched the townhouse. The cult knew the truth was stirring, and they would not allow it to escape into the light.
The storm broke over London with a violence that seemed almost biblical. Rain lashed the cobblestones, thunder rolled across the Thames, and the city's gas lamps flickered like dying stars. In the chaos of the night, truth clawed its way to the surface. Eleanor Blackwell stood in her salon, the velvet curtains drawn tight, her courtesans gathered around her like frightened birds. The betrayal had already come. Clara was gone, vanished into the fog, her absence a wound that spoke louder than words. Eleanor knew where she had gone, to them, to the society that had once claimed Eleanor herself. Thomas Gray arrived drenched, his notebook ruined by the rain, but his resolve unshaken. He carried no weapon but his words, yet in that moment he looked like a soldier marching into battle. "They're moving tonight," he said, his voice low. "I followed them. Lords, bishops, men of parliament, they're gathering in the crypt beneath St. Paul's." Eleanor's breath caught. St. Paul's, the very heart of London's faith, now hollowed out by corruption. Together they descended into the city's underbelly. The crypt was alive with candlelight and chanting, the air thick with incense and smoke. Dozens of figures in robes and masks stood in a circle, their voices rising in a grotesque hymn. At the center lay an altar draped in silk. Upon it the symbols Eleanor had once traced with trembling hands. Thomas scribbled furiously, but Eleanor could not look away. She saw the faces behind the masks, men who had dined in her parlor, who had sworn oaths of morality in Parliament, who had knelt in pews beside their wives, and above them all, presiding with solemn authority, stood a royal advisor, his mask gilded, his voice commanding. "Purity through sacrifice, purity through sin." The words echoed through the chamber, and Eleanor felt the weight of her past crush her chest. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the shadows. "Clara!" Her face pale, her eyes wide with fear and devotion. "She betrayed you once," she cried, pointing at Eleanor. "She will betray you again." The circle turned, dozens of masked eyes fixed on Eleanor. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "No," she said, "it is you who betray yourselves. You hide behind masks, behind prayers twisted into filth. You are not purity. You are rot." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some shouted, some advanced, others faltered. Thomas seized Eleanor's arm, pulling her back as the cult surged forward. They fled into the tunnels, the sound of chanting and pursuit echoing behind them. By dawn, they emerged into the rain-soaked streets. London looked unchanged. Carriages rattled, merchants shouted, ladies hurried with parasols. But Eleanor and Thomas knew the truth. Beneath the polished marble and lace, the city was hollow. Eleanor turned to Thomas, her face pale but resolute. "You must write it," she said. "Even if it destroys us both, the world must know." Thomas nodded, though he knew the cost. His words would not topple the empire overnight, but they would plant a seed of doubt, of truth, of reckoning. And so the story closed not with triumph, but with revelation. Victorian London had not been destroyed by plague or poverty. It rotted from within, eaten away by desire, corruption, and guilt hidden behind manners and perfume. The city would march on, its empire gleaming in the daylight, but in the fog, in the shadows, the rot would always remain.